world of cable news screaming and social media echo chambers, it's easy to lose the signal in the noise. Every day, policy is debated, votes are cast, and your tax dollars are spent. We cut through the headlines to bring you the critical context you need, focusing on what's really going on in news and politics. Welcome to the Analytical Iowan Podcast. This is your daily dose of fact-driven politics. Let's analyze today's news. Here's Eric.
We are live here on TikTok, trying something new here, going live a lot later than I normally do, trying to get a different group of people in on the live. Don't have any moderators. This is going to be the Analytical Iowan Podcast for Saturday, January 24th, as we're waiting for people to join us here. And we're going to give this a shot. And if I don't get anybody here in a little while, I'll shut it down. We're talking news, politics. I see Rocky out there. It's a name I seem to recognize. Going ahead doing something a little different tonight. I'm trying a little later live. Let's see if I get anybody here in the room. Got a lot to talk about. We got a whole bunch of stuff going on when it comes to Donald Trump, his failed immigration policy, and everything else. So what's on everybody's mind? What are we irritated by? What's going on? What are we worried about? And, it never stops with this administration. He started his Board of Peace here the other day. It flopped. Some of the people that he thought was going to be there to show up. Rocky says everything. I'm worried about every damn thing. Well, that's fair. There's a lot of shit going on. Gonna try to see what we can do to calm some of those fears. That's one of the things that I do here on the Analytical Iowan podcast and TikToks. We've got so much going on. One of the things I've seen a lot of people worried about is Donald Trump joking again the other day about a potential fourth term. And not third, but fourth. That he feels great. He could go for 3, maybe 4 terms. Well, it ain't going to happen. Okay? Donald Trump is not going to make 4 terms. I don't think he's going to make it to the end of this term. And he's not going to see it coming. One of the things that I think is going to happen is that when the Republicans decide enough is enough and they're going to move on him, when it happens, it's going to be quick, it's going to be fast, he's not going to see it happening. And the Republicans are going to decide that they need to move on. Their path forward is going to be, at least in the short term, J.D. Vance. I just do not expect Donald Trump to be sitting in the Oval Office heading into the general going into 2028. I just don't think it's going to be a thing. His health doesn't look good, and if you saw him at Davos the last couple of days, he was holding that podium for dear life. He's got a pretty defined lean. He walked down the red carpet staggering worse than a lot of intoxicated people. I said about it, if I couldn't walk a straight line, or I walked a straight line the way Donald Trump tried to walk down that red carpet when the police stopped me, they'd get me for drunk in public or public intox. It was bad. And if that's the best you got to say about me, Wayne, let's see. You can go away. I don't deal with MAGAs in my comment section. And for those of you who aren't on TikTok, when you're catching this over on the podcast, Wayne said, well, he looks better than you. And that may be true. Donald Trump may look better than me. I never claimed to be handsome. But I don't deal with harassment and bullying. You're gone. Not dealing with it. Donald Trump is not healthy. And that is something the Republicans are going to have to deal with. They don't want to admit it. They're burying it. They're trying to keep it hidden and keep it away from us, right? They're not talking about his health. They want us to think and act like he's fit as a fiddle. Clearly he's not. If you saw any of the stuff coming out of Davos, He was talking about Switzerland. Or not Switzerland. He was talking about Greenland in Switzerland. Magdalena says, hello, sir. Just joined your life. Sir? Well, that's a new one. Don't normally get called sir, but thank you for joining. Autumn says, true statement, talking about Donald Trump not looking good. No, he doesn't look good. He was at Davos. He was talking about Greenland, and numerous times he referred to it as Iceland. And Caroline Levitt comes out and says, no, he said a piece of ice, because that's what it is. You're mistaken. What? Well, you hear the clip. The clip's been everywhere. But she doesn't want us to talk about what's really going on. They're covering for him up until the point when they make that decision, and then watch the dog pile. It is going to be a dog pile when they can't cover for him anymore, and when they decide that enough's enough and they need to move on. Brent says, doesn't help that KK Levitt lies from constantly. Yeah, Caroline Levitt covers for him ridiculously right now. And what's he going to do when she's gone? And he even threw her under the bus when he talked about some of the stuff going on. He said, well, my PR team isn't doing very good. Well, who's his PR team? Caroline Levitt. Rocky says, people like my brother will believe her over their own eyes. It's weird. It is very weird. Historians are going to be looking back at this, and sociologists and psychologists are going to be studying this period of history for a long time. Donald Trump could come out tomorrow and say the sky is purple, and at least a section of this country would cheer him on and say, yeah, the sky is purple. Donald Trump is always telling the truth. How did I never know it was purple every day? They believe it. Truth be told says, really? What do you mean? Rocky says, exactly. Brent says, Carney did amazing at Davos. From what I've seen, yeah. Carney, the Prime Minister of Canada, said, a bunch of things that were true and had a great conference. Had applause. Standing ovation, I believe. Donald Trump, crickets. They couldn't tolerate him. Nobody came to talk to him when he showed up. Poor little Donnie all by his lonesome. Truth be told said, are you drunk? Yeah. See, that's the thing with MAGA. When they don't have anything to argue you on because you actually have the facts, they resort to personal insults. And, well, screw them, they're blocked. I don't deal with that in my lives. Autumn says that's MAGA for you. Exactly. Yeah, they'll believe it. MAGA will believe anything. I see Laddie out there. Haven't seen you in my lives for a while, but that's somebody I recognize. Delta Blue says you are right. Well, thank you. Brent says unreal. It is unreal. The things MAGA will believe, all because it came out of Donald Trump's mouth. And I've known people like that. Not that it was all believing Donald Trump, but I've known people who would hear something from a family member, a specific family member, or their pastor, their priest, whatever you want to call it, their clergyman. And if those people said it, it had to absolutely be true. And it couldn't possibly be that they were misinformed or that they didn't understand. If it came from those certain people, it was the God honest truth. Magdalena says, truth be told, no, he's not drunk because you snatched the Kool-Aid. Yeah, exactly. And truth be told, it's already blocked. Bren says they probably think Ice taking that 5-year-old is okay. Yeah, I was just in Will's Live earlier tonight for a little bit, and they were talking about, was it not Bongino, Bovino, the guy in the trench coat who looks like he would fit in 1930s Germany. And he said, yeah, this is exactly what we want. I'm talking about snatching up 2-year-olds. And we got another MAGA out there. Lisa says, you have facts, just chose to ignore it. No, I see the facts. That's why I'm protesting everything Donald Trump is doing. Vincent said like Canada would join that farce, talking about Donnie and his Board of Peace. Exactly. They know what's going to happen with that. When his Board of Peace actually comes around, it's going to be, it's going to be gone when he's gone, right? It's not going to be a permanent thing. He thinks it's going to replace the UN, and it's not. It's just another grift. Lisa is calling me a paid protester, which is why I blocked her. I'm not a paid protester. I'm just a guy who's fed up. Gloria says, good morning. Well, good morning to you. Ayla Marie says, King Energy. Well, thank you. Brent says, families have to hide their kids. Yeah, they do. Fred Harry says, Brent said they tried to return the 5-year-old to his family. They rejected the lad at the door. Do you have a source for that? Do you have any sort of proof that that's true? Or is it just another one of these trust me bro situations? Cameron White says, y'all realize they took the kids into the... Yeah. I can tell by your profile you're a MAGA chud. And I'm pretty sure Fred's another MAGA. And I'm just going to go ahead and save time and block them both. Let's see. Thank you for the follow. Shauna says, hi, I'm from Iowa too. Well, another Iowan there. I think Iowa's got a chance to flip blue, or at least purple. And I've already got a restriction. Thank you, MAGA. I got 2 restrictions. Been going for 10 minutes. And I've now restricted for 10 minutes. Gotta love it. Let's see, what did I get? They didn't say. They don't say why. But I got 10-minute restriction. Gotta love MAGA. Jay says, does that paid protest come with pants? Yeah, nice, Jay. Gloria says, major protests going on in Minneapolis today. Yeah, I've heard about that. Ava Marie says, he didn't leave his kid. He was detained with the toddler, both legal, and the child was taken into custody. That's kind of the way I heard it. Then they said that, yeah, they left him at the door of the home to lure the others outside. Yeah, that's what they're doing. They're using the kids to get other people going. And nope, still got the restriction going. Rocky says the protest in Minneapolis was impressive. From what I've seen, yes, it was. Shauna says, please stay warm. Yeah, it's colder than shit outside. 6 below, I think, 8 below, something like that. That's just the temp. That's not counting wind chill, but luckily, at least last time I was out, wind wasn't too bad. Not doing much outside other than letting the dog out and running back inside. Shauna says, go Rob Sand. Yeah, I agree. I think Rob Sand has a good chance of being Iowa's next governor. A real good chance, actually. Considering he's the only statewide elected Democrat, and there's been a lot of changes that can only be laid at the feet of Republicans. I think Iowa has a really good chance of flipping blue. Jerry says, do they have proof they didn't take care of the 5-year-old? Not that I've seen. Rocky says, wow, what a bunch of babies MAGA are. Yeah, they are. That's what they do. If they can't, they can't get their way, they turn around, they report you live, they try to get you taken down, they sling insults. That's why I block them. Madam says, wow, yeah. Gloria says, ICE has entered Maine. A lot of good hunters there, just saying. Never know what'll happen in Maine. Thing is, they're going in places like Minnesota and Maine. Why aren't they going to like Texas? Just wondering. Bobby says, I just don't understand the cruelty. Maybe I'm too sensitive, but I think our souls are at risk. The cruelty is the point. The cruelty is the point. They enjoy the cruelty. because it's all about treating people they don't like, who are different than them, as other. And they enjoy the cruelty. Ayla says they are allowed to go to school grounds now, not into schools and daycare facilities. Yes, that is a change with this current administration. They, previously, the DOJ guidance and the ICE guidance, DHS guidance, had all said churches, schools, daycare centers, and the like were all off limits. They don't care. They are full on doing whatever they want and hoping for the best. And they're getting the worst. Shauna says, I think he has a great chance talking about Rob Sand. I do too. The thing I'm afraid of is if for some reason he loses the primary, that it will kill the Democrats' momentum in Iowa. And unless they have somebody even better going up, in his place, I'm just worried that the Democrats are going to screw it up. Ayla says it's a clear violation of children's rights and not the protocol ICE themselves. They say they practice. Yeah, they don't care about protocol. They don't care about people's rights. They only care about the cruelty and doing whatever they want. I mean, that's why the 3%ers, the Proud Boys, the Oath Keepers, Patriot Front, all those paramilitary groups, you don't hear about a lot of them anymore. Because all of them have been roped into ICE. They're now getting federal funds. They're getting bonuses for being cruel. This is the shit they would have done for free on the weekends. Vincent says, how dare Trump disrespect the troops of NATO? I mean, he shouldn't, but are you surprised by a guy who was deferred from the draft 5 times? He doesn't give 2 shits about the military. Never has, never will. He calls them losers and suckers for getting killed. Remember what he said about John McCain. He says, I prefer my heroes to not have been caught. Donald Trump does not care about the military at all. And so he comes out and says, when it comes to NATO troops, yeah, they weren't there. They didn't come to us. Would they really defend us? Keep in mind, Article 5 of NATO, the one that everybody has the most problem with, including Congress, that they've always been iffy on, has been the fact that Article 5 says an attack against one is an attack against all. It's only ever been invoked once. Once. And that was by us after 9/11. And everybody in NATO came to our aid. Brent says they're blue states. They're going after blue states that didn't vote for them. That's a chunk of it. Gloria says, oh, they are. They have family in Texas. Yeah. They are going after some, but they're not really focusing, and we're not hearing about Texas, not nearly to the extent. It's all about punishing, blue states in Minnesota. Vincent says those 7 corporate Democrats, yeah. Talking about the 7 Democrats who voted to help fund ICE. And they may get primaried out. Gloria says they don't obey any laws, talking about ICE. No, they don't. They don't care about obeying any laws. Gloria also says, exactly, he's a draft dodger. Yeah, Donald Trump dodged the draft 5 times. He got deferments 5 times for bone spurs. But he wants us to believe that he was, that he's some major supporter of the military. He's only using them because they're a prop and a tool. Gloria says the only time was 9/11, talking about Article 5. The only time it's ever been invoked was 9/11. We called it, and NATO came to our aid. And then you have the buffoon that is Donald Trump, who has the audacity to stand up in front of NATO and say that they didn't really come in, and that they were off, and that they backed down, and they weren't on the front lines. He has no idea what actually happened during most of the Afghanistan and Iraq conflicts. And he only knows what people probably have told him. And somebody who doesn't like NATO probably told him that they didn't do anything. And that's where he's getting his information from. Vincent says, out of those 7 Democrats, one of them was the Democrat Trump pardoned. And that's exactly why Trump pardoned him, to get favorable votes. He was actually hoping that he'd become a Republican, but that didn't happen. Gloria says, my cousin told me they came to his factory and pulled 25 American citizens and they didn't come back. I'm not surprised. ICE is only supposed to be detaining people up until the point when they have been identified as American citizens. But they don't believe the paperwork they're given. They don't care. When this administration is gone, there are going to be major hearings, major trials and tribunals, and there are going to be all sorts of things, and the truth is going to come out, and the people that are involved are going to be held responsible. So that's what they have to look forward to. There's going to be congressional hearings. There are going to be, actual criminal charges against everybody involved, and they're not going to get away with it as long as the Democrats put somebody with some willingness to go after people in as Attorney General. Monica says, Trump is also calling at the Black History, stripping off civil rights. Did you see what he did in Philly? Yeah, I saw that. Gloria says she saw it too. Says, I seen that. That's crazy. Yeah, it was at the president's house in Philly, where they stripped off plaques honoring abolitionists and the Underground Railroad and people trying to free the slaves. I guarantee you, if Donald Trump thought he could get away with it, he would probably try to advocate for repealing the 13th Amendment the way he acts. He doesn't want us talking about that part of American history because they say they don't want people who have my skin complexion to feel bad about themselves. Simple fact of the matter is, I was taught about all of the things that happened during the Civil War, pre-Civil War, and during up until the civil rights, etc. And it's never made me feel bad for being and looking the way I look. It makes me want to make sure that it doesn't happen again. Vincent says, MAGA thinks America can fight the world, forgetting it takes manpower and capital. Yeah, it's going to take a lot of manpower, a lot of capital, and the only reason we are capable of taking on most of the world at any given moment is because of our alliances like NATO and our ability to form friendships and to get other countries to help us. If we were just going off of our own, the rest of the world, if most of them combined against us, I don't think we stand as much of a chance as they think we do. Jay says, short drop, sudden stop. That's how it went the last time this shit happened. Gonna happen again. It very well could. Very well could. We need to make sure it never happens again. Well, one of my restrictions dropped off, the 10-minute restriction. Let's see if that brings more people in. The other one's still sitting there. I got reported for harassment and bullying for calling out MAGA. So, shows you where they're at. That's fine. We'll just deal with the few people that are in here. We'll talk, and I went live way later than I normally do, and didn't know if I'd even get anybody in the room. So we're just going to keep going with this conversation and see how long we go. Autumn says, damn. Yeah. But that's what MAGA does. You step on their feelings, and they report you. They try to get Daddy TikTok to take you down. And now that TikTok is owned by more Trump-favored entities, it's probably going to continue to happen. Jay says, I meant the short drop and sudden stop could and should happen again, else bad people don't learn. Tend to agree. You're right, it could. Monica says, what really, that is so diabolical they put a restriction on you. They're doing it to everybody. Well, I think it was from the point earlier when I was ranting about MAGA and saying that's why I block them all. I think that's when somebody I hadn't got to and gotten blocked yet reported me, and suddenly I got the restriction. I got 2 in about 5 seconds. Vincent says, tell people where to find you because of TikTok's new management. Oh, yeah. And this live will be up over on my YouTube page, Analytical Iowan. It'll also be available on Spotify. This is going to be the Analytical Iowan podcast. For those of you that are new, that haven't seen me before, I do a podcast daily. While this is going, my podcast from yesterday should be getting uploaded, barring it stalling for any reason. But I try to do a daily show. I get most every day. I get a podcast up. So you can find me on YouTube, on Spotify, on Blue Sky. And if I get kicked off of here, well, that is what it is. And I just keep posting my stuff elsewhere. I'll give somebody else my content. Gloria says, well, if Japan, China, and Canada call in their debts, it would trash the country's economy. Yeah, it would. Oh, if they called everything in, if we had to start paying all of that right away, it would crash everything. Because what Donald Trump doesn't realize is there's only a finite number of places where we can borrow money as a country. We don't have unlimited, groups. And if we can't borrow when we need to borrow money, then eventually the bills are all going to come due with nowhere to borrow to continue to pay. And if we have to start paying off those debts, it's going to be horrendous. We're talking probably worse than 1929, and because he likes to compare to it. Brent says, "Are you on Clapper still?" I do have a Clapper account. I have not posted over there for a long time. It's a little clunkier. A lot of the videos I was uploading, I had to try 4, 5, 6 times to get them uploaded. They'd get almost all the way through and then they would fail. So I gave up on it. If I can find a system that actually works with Clapper that would help me automate it, where they would handle the uploads for me, I would probably go back. I currently have one that I use that uploads almost all of my TikToks up to YouTube and Blue Sky for me right away. That's how you get my stuff on those apps now within an hour or so of them going live, simply because I'm paying for automation because I was getting too far behind. I couldn't keep up. Gloria says it would crash the exchanges. Yeah. That's the thing. It would crash a lot of things if they called in all of our debts. It wouldn't be good. Vincent said a country can't just print money every time. No, we can't. They act like we can just print money. One of the things they were talking about was printing or minting $1 trillion coin, like 40 of them. $40 trillion coins, putting them in the treasury and saying, see, we've got $40 trillion of assets here. Problem is when it's backed by nothing and you just made it, all it's going to do is cause hyperinflation, and suddenly that $2 loaf of bread, which it's already the fact that it's almost $2, in some places over 2, is now going to be 20. That's kind of what happened to Germany in the period between the end of World War I and the real rise of the group that was in charge going into World War II. They had such hyperinflation, they were taking wheelbarrows full of money down the street, and that was all you could use. It took all of it to buy like one loaf of bread. It was ridiculous. We don't need hyperinflation. Donald Trump's complaining about having 3%, and you want some inflation. If we switch and we start having deflation, that is when we start worrying about being in a recession or a depression. Gloria says he would need trillions to pay off our debts. Yeah, we're at like almost $30 trillion in debt. Last time we were in a surplus, we were dealing with a surplus, was in the Clinton administration, where we actually brought in more money than what we were spending. They could do it by jumping the tax rates on the wealthy back up to about 90%, as long as they didn't raise spending accordingly. We could end up having our debt and make big progress, but they don't do it. Vincent says, reminds me of that one African country with high counted bills. Exactly. You just keep printing larger and larger denominations and keep saying, well, I've got all this money. All it leads to is inflation, and it leads to everything being ridiculously expensive. Autumn said, well, that will be a start to make America great again. Yeah, taking away the billions from people like him would be a start, but it's not a permanent solution. Gloria says, the arrogance of the orange shit stain just baffles me, that intelligent people believe every lie coming out. No, intelligent people don't believe it. That's the problem. The people that believe him are, as he likes to put it, the poorly educated. Or as he said, smart people don't like me. He can call them dumb to their face, and they don't even realize it. It's amazing. Yeah, Donald Trump, Gloria says, our PM more or less did. Called him an idiot? Yeah. Well, he needs to hear it more often. Donald Trump is a buffoon, and he doesn't know what he's talking about 90% of the time. In fact, if you listen to what he says, I don't get where they think he's even got a train of thought anymore. At all. His health, it's very clear he is suffering from some bout of dementia. Vincent says, without a doubt, the administration is sending money to the separatists in Canada. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if they did. Donald Trump wants to gain Cuba, Venezuela, Greenland, Canada, whatever, because it's all about legacy, I think, more than it's actually about national security. He wants to do it because we say it can't be done. We actually say it shouldn't be done. But he's doing it because he's worried about what is going to be remembered, or what he's going to be remembered for, right? And he wants to be remembered for adding that next star on the flag. But see, he doesn't want to do the one thing that would be very popular for adding a star to the flag, by giving statehood to Puerto Rico. That would be great. He doesn't want to do that because, well, they got the wrong skin tone. Jay says he's both the son and great nephew of the devil himself. I don't know how he pulled it off, but you might be right, Jay. Gloria says, I work with seniors. He has sundowner syndrome. Yeah, and part of sundowning is like him being wide awake in the middle of the night, and he just fires off stream of consciousness 3-4 hour True Social posts. It's all nonsense. And but he's definitely sundowning. That's why they're trying to limit his outings, and they're trying to limit what he's doing, and they're propping him up with treatments. I think that's where the bruising on his hands are coming from, is he's getting IV treatments. I really do. I think they blew out his the veins in his arms, and now they had to move to his hands, and now they can't get a vein in his right hand, so they're giving him IVs in his left. Vincent says, do Democratic administration have problem with separatist movements in America? Just the far few MAGA dumbasses who crow about civil war all the time, and they keep saying, well, the South is going to rise again. Gloria says exactly that came in when I was talking about Donnie and his IV treatments. Brent says he is for sure getting IV treatments. Yeah, I believe so. I firmly believe he is getting propped up, and it is what is keeping him as coherent as he actually is. I would hate to see what he would be like without those. They're just trying to prop him up to the point when they can't prop him up anymore. And that when that time comes, they're going to dogpile on him, and he's going to be out. I think they're also trying to see if they can make it past the midterms because they think he still has some value for the midterms. Jay says, devil-blooded from both sides and incest to boot. Joffrey Baratheon, anyone? I don't know who you're talking about. But I think they are trying to prop him up for the midterms because they're afraid of getting smoked. And I think the Republicans are going to get smoked in the midterms, where it's going to be, something like they get hit with losing 30, 40, 50 seats in the House, and they could lose the Senate. Uh... 865 says Weekend at Bernie's. Yeah, they're weak. If they could prop him up with just a boombox, they would. But it's taking a little more than a boombox to prop him up at this point. Instead of Weekend at Bernie's, it's Weekend at Donnie's. They're just trying to string him along until either he does something so absolutely egregious that they can't defend it, till the Epstein files come out and say something about him where there's something they can't defend or deny or deflect from, or until they get past the 2-year mark and they can finally say, well, if we play our cards right, that it would be, they could have J.D. Vance for 10 years. They won't have J.D. Vance for 10 years, but that'd be their plan. Mr. Nice Guy says, what flavor is the Coca-Cola? Tonight, Sprite Zero Sugar. Gloria says he has, but they just make excuses and blame Biden. Well, yeah, they do. But there's going to come a point when it gets to where they absolutely can't defend him. Representative Don Bacon a few days ago said if he takes military action in Greenland, for example, they already have the votes to impeach and remove him if he goes that far. I don't know if that's why Donnie chickened out and why he came out and said, well, we got everything we want. We're going to do what we want, and now we have a deal. And he backed down. I don't know if that's why he backed down. If he backed down because it landed with a thud in front of world leaders, I don't know. But Don Bacon says they have the votes to remove him if needed. Gloria says that happened January 6, 2021. Oh yeah, he went too far. And they said he went too far then. Problem was, and the only reason we're still dealing with Donald Trump in 2026 lies solely at the feet of Mitch McConnell. Why? Because during the second impeachment trial of Donald Trump, it went into the Biden administration. And Mitch McConnell came out with that weak-ass excuse and said, well, it's a moot point. He's out of office. We don't need to impeach and remove him now. We can let the criminal justice system handle it. He expected and he hoped that the DOJ under Biden was going to take care of his dirty work, get rid of Donnie for us, and then when it didn't happen, they turned around, they bent down, and they kissed the ring when he didn't get handled immediately. It should have been a thing where the evidence was pretty clear. I didn't know why they needed a 2-year investigation. They could have been able to charge him with something almost immediately, but Merrick Garland said, it's a political matter and I don't want to, we're not going to get the DOJ involved. And they didn't really start an investigation for almost 2 years till the public outcry was loud enough that they could do something. Mr. Night Guy says, Mitch is old. He is. He's very old. Gloria says, can you please explain how a convicted felon can be president? Yeah, very easily. The founders didn't plan on it. There are 3 criteria in order to be president. Only 3. Natural-born U.S. citizen, at least 35 years old, and having not served 2 terms or 10 years as president. That's it. Those are the only 3 criteria. And Donald Trump doesn't fit into any of those criteria. There was never a thing about felons. They expected that the parties would never they expected that the parties would never promote a felon to be the top of their ticket, to even be a nominee. And prior to Donald Trump, if you go back as late as when Romney or John McCain ran, the Republican Party never would have considered it. Pre-Donald Trump, the Republican Party never would have considered running a felon because they were always pro-law enforcement. You know, they were always the back the blue party, you know, and they wouldn't have tried it. But Donnie spun it around and, you know, now that they don't care. Mr. Night Guy says, how healthy is Mitch? Talking about Mitch McConnell. I don't know. He glitches out every now and then. He's not doing good. But he's also not running for re-election. His seat is up for election in November. So come January 3rd, he will be out of Congress if the Reaper doesn't get him first. Jay says, that automatically disqualifies Donnie, citizen of hell, not the U.S. Referring to January 6th. It should have. It should have. If Mitch McConnell would have had a backbone, he could have been disqualified then, but he expected the criminal justice system to deal with it, and Merrick Garland refused. Gloria says, so any criminal can run. Yeah. Pretty much. Pretty much. There is nothing preventing it. I think when Donald Trump is out of office, when the Democrats have power again, I think they are going to actually pass a few more amendments. It wouldn't surprise me anyway. And I think one of the things they're going to put in there, and I think it will be met with bipartisan support, is that no felon can be president or vice president. And it wouldn't be the first time that Congress has acted in as a direct response to the presidency. Within 3 years, I think it was 3 or 4 years of the death of FDR, Congress passed the 22nd Amendment, limiting it to 2 terms. Gloria says it's crazy. It is crazy that a felon can be president, but there's only 3 criteria. U.S. born or natural born U.S. citizen, 35 years old, and can't have served 2 full terms or 10 years as president if you were a VP or somebody else, anybody else in the line of succession that had to become president. Mr. Nice Guy says, what is the likelihood of J.D. Vance becoming president through a non-election process? I would think very, very high. I think at some point the Republicans are going to have to Republicans are going to have to turn on Donald Trump. I think they will. And when they do, it's going to be a dog pile, and they're going to toss him out on his ear. I think their plan is to have J.D. Vance in sometime between the midterms and 2028 general. And they would have to, their whole campaign for 28, I believe, is going to be give J.D. Vance another term with Republicans in Congress, because those damn evil Democrats, who I believe are going to have control of at least one, if not both houses, those damn evil Democrats prevented him from getting anything done and fixing all the problems from Biden. It's not going to be from Trump. They will still blame Biden when J.D. Vance takes over, I'm assuming in 27. Unless something happens between now and then, the Big Mac gets Donnie or something like that. But I don't see any way Donald Trump makes it to January 20th, 2029. Love Big Dog says, crazy, we have to make an amendment not to elect a felon. Yeah, it is. All the way through, our politicians always thought that the parties would be strong enough to not promote a felon. Magdalena says a president can be a felon, but felons can't vote. Yeah, exactly. Jay says, Inger Støjberg is still in the Folketing in Denmark. Denmark Democrats leader criminal. Don't know anything about that, Jay. Vincent said, thoughts on two-party system or multi-party system? Well, the problem is, I think ultimately the United States is always going to go back to a two-party system. I think if we have a multi-party system, it's going to be when the Republicans collapse, which is probably going to be when Donnie's gone. Is that there'll be a third party will rise for a while, and then one or the other is going to balance out. I don't know where that third party is going to sit, if it's going to be conservative or if it's going to be extremely liberal, but ultimately it's going to balance back out. One of them is going to die, probably the Republicans, and then they would end up back in a two-party system. Gloria says, Mr. Nice Guy, that's even scarier. He's pulling the strings now. Yeah. Donald Trump is he's got the strings right now, and JD Vance is he's sitting back. I don't think he's got nearly as much control as people think yet, but maybe eventually he's going to be in charge. I just don't think I think he takes over before we get to the end of this term. Jay says, right-wing freak like dump and couch pounder. Okay, I'll take your word for it. Geocaching Dono says, I think it's the Democrats' plan. What's their plan? I don't understand. Jay says, conservatism is done after this. I think there's always going to be conservatives of some kind. Jay says, we're going to have a liberal central right and a social democrat socialist far left. Maybe, but the conservatives will be part of that, what you call liberal center right policy. And eventually they would go back, they would be accepting of the conservative idea. I don't think you're ever going to get rid of that full conservative ideology. There's always going to be people that want to cling tightly to what they know, and they're scared of change. The funny thing is, a lot of the things that conservatives like, or they accept, right? One of the things you hear about from Republicans, specifically older Republicans, is, well, you're not touching my Social Security. They only have Social Security, and they want to hold on to it. They want to conserve their Social Security. They don't want any changes to it. But they only have it because of liberal progressives for their time. Love Big Dog says Generation Z and Alpha aren't joining conservatives. For the most part. It really depends. And I think one of the biggest things that hurt Republicans and conservatives as far as recruiting those younger voices was the loss of Charlie Kirk. Gloria says, I crossed the floor and voted for Carney with my whole family is conservative, but you couldn't vote for PP. I don't know who PP is. I remember his opposition, Carney's. I just don't remember his name. Jay says, I suspect the Democratic Party splits in two, or the WFP or DSA steps in to replace the R's. Could be. But I said, like 3 years ago on the Rational Boomer, when I thought we were a lot closer to wiping out the Republicans, is that eventually the Democrats could end up splitting in two, where the Democrats become the new conservative party and the extreme liberal wing splits off at some point. Vincent says, we will see PP leader review goes. Oh, PP, Pierre Poilievre. Maple MAGA chud knockoff dump. That's what Jay said. Yeah, okay. Gloria said the same thing. Okay. I just couldn't remember his name. I knew he was the opposition. I think he had a better chance going up against Trudeau. But that was only because people didn't like Trudeau, not because they liked his ideology. At least that's the way I understand it. Those more familiar with Canada can always prove me wrong, because I'm not overly familiar with Canadian politics. Jay says, I got to drop out, but have a good night, y'all. Well, thanks for stopping in, Jay. As always, nice to see you. I don't know how late I'm going to go tonight. This was kind of a last-minute decision. I was laying there thinking I should do something. I couldn't figure out what, so I decided to go live. Gloria says he's never worked a day in his life. Professional politician. Talking about Pierre Poilievre. Okay. Yeah, I don't like professional politicians. We've got a problem with them here in the United States too. We got ones that won't retire. They won't step down. They want to hang on to the levers of power. And part of that, I'm going to put the blame on my generation, on the millennials. But part of it is the millennials, a little bit on the Gen Xers. When it was our turn to start stepping up and stepping into politics and taking over, we looked around and said, yeah, the boomers got it. They like this. They want to deal with it. So we're going to let them handle it. And we didn't step up. Should have. But we didn't. Vincent says, was not into politics till last year, voted for the first time for Carney. Well, there's a first time for everything. And glad to see you stepping into politics. Gloria says, glad you did. Yeah, I mean, I've always said, even when I was younger, that if you don't vote, you can't bitch. I mean, even if your side loses, this was back before politics was radicalized. But I used to say, if you don't vote, you can't bitch. Because my thought on it was, even if your person loses, right, you tried. You tried to get the people in that were going to push the policies and the agenda you wanted. And that gave you a right to complain. Now, maybe I'm wrong, because I know there are some people who don't have the right to vote, and there's a reason why they didn't or they can't or whatever. But, you know, people need to be aware of what's going on with politics, because some of the ones that just aren't paying attention, if they knew what was going on, if they knew about the things going on in Minneapolis with ICE, if they were actually paying attention and understood the ramifications of what Trump was trying to do with Greenland and pissing off our allies, they would be willing to vote, but they're not paying attention. Matt says, I absolutely agree, but it wasn't as radical as it is now. The 80s, 90s. No, it wasn't. Back then, it was much calmer. It was basically, you know, for the most part, they could agree on everything. Where it came down to, it was never, like on food stamps, right? It was never, we don't want anybody on food stamps. It was, you were down to how much money and a little bit of the criteria. Now, this administration, the Republicans, the way they are now, they're more willing to say, nobody gets food. Get off, work, pull yourself up by the bootstraps and go out and work. Whereas before, they at least were willing to work together. Things being bipartisan is the exception now, and it used to be the rule. Don says, I'm a violent felon and can't vote in my state. Well, sorry to hear that. You know, and if there are ways for you to get your voting rights back, maybe you can look into that. And like I said, there are reasons why you can't vote, but there's a lot of people who just choose not to that could, because they have no interest in the political system and they figure it's all going to work out. And you always hear the two halves of the same coin complaint. And it's not two halves of the same coin. It is, there are, right, especially right now, there's a very clear definition or dividing line between the two sides. One side wants to help as many people as they can. The other side wants to help absolutely nobody. Mad River says very few people don't have a right to vote. If you were a U.S. citizen, you have a right to vote. Yeah, but a lot of states, if you are convicted of a felony, you lose your voting rights. And that is part of why some of the things the Republicans are trying to do includes felonies, like with their abortion bans. They're trying to make it felonies so that way women can't vote. That's part of it anyway. 865 says a no vote is a vote for Republicans. Pretty much. Actually, I'm going to correct that. A non-vote is a vote for whatever person you don't like. Because it works both ways. If you want the Republican to win and you don't vote, you're essentially voting in favor of your opposition because you didn't try to help that person win. Gloria says we still use paper ballots in a federal election in Canada. Does the U.S. or is it electronic? It depends on the state. Here in Iowa, we use paper ballots that have the ovals. Like when you're taking a test in school, you have to fill in the oval and you have to fill it in completely, no marking outside the oval, all those things, and then it gets scanned by a machine. Some states have actual voting machines where you have to go in and touch the screen and pick who you vote for or push the buttons. That's part of what happened in Florida in 2000. They used a voting machine where you put a punch card into the machine and you had to press it, and if you didn't press it right, it didn't punch out the right or the hole fully and didn't count. And every state runs elections differently. That is part of why it is such a hodgepodge of rules and things. Vincent says, as a First Nation, I can't believe what's going on with Native Americans with ICE. I wish I could say I couldn't believe it, but it really depends. I'm not surprised by ICE. You don't have this complexion and they don't like you. It's all about, skin tone and things like that. Magdalena says, why is it that felons can't vote? And is it ever? That depends. Depends on your state. It depends on if you have ways of getting your voting rights back. Some states do. I think Iowa does. I know one of the reasons why Donnie was able to vote in his own presidential election is because in Florida, because it was state crimes, Florida says, well, it goes by the rules of the state you were convicted in. And, well, for Donald Trump in New York, the law is convicted felons can't vote while they're incarcerated. And because he wasn't sitting in a cell, he could vote, so he was allowed to vote in Florida. It is a hodgepodge of rules, and sometimes you can get them back, sometimes you can't. Vincent says, have to carry tribal ID and papers. Yeah, that's... gotta play the puzzle piece game. Gotta prove I'm real. Have to carry tribal ID and papers. I talked about that. Don says, I'm in Alabama. My felon conviction makes me ineligible to vote even with restitution. Well, that's too bad. And at some point, hopefully Alabama changes the laws and you get a chance to vote again. Mad River says, Pennsylvania went to paper ballot. And that's part of it. There are going to be some that go back. Mad River says, Pennsylvania used to have the machines where you pulled the curtain and pulled the button. And yeah, again, it's a hodgepodge. Every state is different. Gloria says, I just don't understand how the U.S. could go back so far in civil rights so quickly. Sad. Exactly. The thing is, we all thought it wouldn't happen. Nobody thought it could happen. Nobody thought it would happen. Nobody expected Donald Trump to be like this, even though we warned everybody. The number of people who are coming out going, well, if somebody would have said that this was going to happen, I didn't think he actually meant it. I thought he was just trolling the left. they didn't realize what was going on. Vincent says the Republicans' 50-year plan. No, it wasn't a 50-year plan. I guarantee you. They didn't have a plan. The only reason they're stuck with Donald Trump right now, it's twofold. The reason they stuck with Donald Trump, he did the impossible. He did the impossible, right? In 2016, all signs pointed going into that election, because he was a buffoon, still is a buffoon, that Hillary was going to win. I think even the most ardent Republicans thought Hillary was going to win. And then he turns around and ends up winning. He fell ass backwards into the presidency. Well, he beat their boogeyman, so he must have something going. Well, then they ran him in 2020, and of course he got smoked by Joe Biden. But then they didn't really have anybody else, and we didn't take care of him on the criminal justice side of things fast enough. And he ran again. And going into 2024, again, all signs looked like Kamala was going to win. And he fell ass backwards into the presidency again. That's why they stick with him, because he pulls it out of his ass. Matt River says, what is he being like? We need to close the border. He did it, and now we need to go get all of them. Yeah, it's because he doesn't like people that don't have this complexion. Notice he's only ever talks about immigrants that come from certain parts of the world. Love Big Dog says Project 2025 was a playbook for him. Yeah, it was. Frank says, what's more shocking is the lack of care by blacks. No, I think it's strategy on their part. I think it's the reason they're not out doing a whole lot of protesting. Some are, but they're being more careful about it, is they don't want to get roped up into it. It's having a bigger impact this way, and they don't want to get caught up with ICE, with charges and things, because Donald would go after them. Matt Rivers says the Democrats didn't have very good candidates. One had dementia, the other was absent. You're talking about are you talking about Joe, or are you talking about for having dementia? He was slowing, but I don't think he nearly had dementia nearly as bad as what we're clearly seeing out of Donald Trump. And Kamala being absent, she wasn't absent. She was in the vice presidency role. What I said way back in July of 2024 is that Democrats better hope they made the right play. And she was the right person to take up the mantle. But I also said after the fact, what she probably should have done, and of course hindsight's 2020, but it would have been better if Joe would have stepped aside, let her become president, take all the pomp and circumstance out of her becoming president. They could have held, because it was scheduled and planned, they could have done an inauguration, they could have done all that. Okay? And then it's all done. And then they have 6 months of her being or 3 months of her being the incumbent, doing the job. And that would have changed the way people voted. Love Big Dog says, being an illegal immigrant is not a crime, it's a misdemeanor. Exactly. And it's also civil, not criminal. The main penalty for being here undocumented is the main penalty for that is removal. RRSJDS says he didn't win, that's bullshit. Well, I don't know if he did. He won. That's the way it is. There's been no evidence brought forward saying he didn't. If there is evidence, I would love to see it. Matt Rivers says he didn't fall ass backwards. He took the popular vote. He swept her. Don't listen to polls. I'm not looking at the polls. I'm looking at his crowd sizes. He could barely fill a high school gym. He was barely raising any money. She was filling auditoriums. She raised, I think it was over $1 billion. All of the momentum looked to be on her side. And if you go back and watch my videos from back then, I said these polls are saying this, and I don't trust the polls. I think polls are bullshit because you don't know who's polling. But I said if the polls are right, and some of them turned out to be wrong. But every indicator looked like Donald Trump was going to lose, including looking at how he did on the economy and handling of COVID. But people forgot how bad things were and how bad he botched COVID, and they were trying to give Joe Biden the blame for how bad things were from COVID for all of 2020 when Joe Biden didn't become president until 2021. Love Big Dog says our immigration system is broken. Let's fix it. We should. Vincent says, what suggestions of new laws and amendments after Trump? Well, I think we need to end up having term limits for Congress, although I don't think that one ever gets put in. I think we need to have an amendment saying felons can't be president. I think we have to have an age limit. Say a hard cap, 70. For all elected officials across the board. Maybe even for the Supreme Court too, put an age cap in there. And then start there and go on and move from there. Love Big Dog says he only won by under 2 million votes. Yeah. It wasn't very close. Matt Rivers says Democrats don't have anybody now that looks good. They don't have anybody that looks good? Gavin Newsom, even though I don't think he's going to be the nominee, he's peaked way too early. You have Andy Beshear out of Kentucky, who you mentioned, the one governor from Kentucky. You have Joe Ossoff in Georgia, or John Ossoff. You have Ro Khanna. You have Gretchen Whitmer up in Michigan. You have J.B. Pritzker in Illinois. You have, I think it's too early for Pete Buttigieg. I don't think he's got a chance. He may make somebody a good VP candidate. Shapiro in Pennsylvania. There's a few others. They have candidates. Jasmine Crockett could be a good candidate. Democrats have a pretty deep bench. Matt Rivers says, and they spent $25 billion, and what did she do? She's been more visible on a book tour. Kamala Harris was doing events every single day during that whole campaign. She was plenty visible. Vincent says, a lot of Americans are seeking asylum in Canada. Hope to God not many MAGA come over. Yeah. The thing is, I thought I read somewhere that because America is considered a first world country, we don't qualify for asylum. RRSJDS says, there's plenty of evidence, too many discrepancies. The discrepancies are enough of, well, that looks weird. I want something physical where they can point to of how it actually happened. Matt Rivers says, but people were living and breathing by those polls and they didn't work. Not everybody. Love Big Dog says he didn't win, he wasn't shot, and he's in the files. I guarantee he wasn't shot, and he's definitely in the files. A lot of what he is doing. Vincent says he used pictures of Obama crowd sizes instead of his own. Oh, yeah. Because he cares about crowd sizes. Matt Rivers says it just proves the polls are bullshit. They hand select who they're talking to. I know, that's why I said I don't trust polls at all. Dan Hatt says wrong, and I'm not going to actually read this quote about what he says about former VP Harris, but says never filled any stadiums. Well, yeah. Dan's just gone. Love Big Dog says your patriarchy is showing, talking about Dan. Yeah. Matt Rivers says Gavin Newsom has destroyed California. Well, you're gone. I can tell you're not going to be of any help now. I thought we were having a halfway decent conversation, but you're just one of the more clever ones to hide the fact that you're MAGA. Matt Rivers says, all the same people that don't do anything or have made poor decisions. The only one that looks good is the governor of Kentucky, and he's the most normal. Gloria says, U.S. citizens can seek political asylum here. Okay, I didn't know that. Last I knew, early in his campaign, they were saying we couldn't because it was considered a first world country and it wasn't bad enough here. Maybe because of all the bullshit he's pulled, it's not bad enough, which is a scary thought. But no, Democrats have a pretty deep bench. They've got a lot of options when it comes to 28. And you're not going to see a front runner probably come out until probably 27 after the midterms, after the new Congress. Angel says, hi from Texas. Well, hello there. Lemon says, I'm betting on Newsom. I don't think it's going to be Newsom. I really don't think it's going to be Gavin Newsom. He's got skeletons in his closet. He's good at making noise right now, and that's what we need. But I think he's peaking too early. You typically don't see a presidential candidate get the nomination this early if they are the front runner. Lemon says he has that charm, though, which icks me out, but it carries a lot of politicians. Yeah, but I think they're going to be looking for somebody way more progressive than Gavin Newsom come 28. I keep saying they need to run somebody on an FDR-style platform. Lemon says you're right. Right now he's making a lot of noise. He is. Gavin Newsom is making a lot of noise. I think they need to run somebody, though, on an FDR-style New Deal. Maybe call it the perfect deal or a better deal for America, something like that. Restore minimum wage back to what it should be, which is a living wage. Hell, scrap minimum wage. Call it, hey, we're going to pass... we're going to pass a new bill repealing the minimum wage, and we're going to call it the living wage. User says, who I just blocked, said, I think they need to run so the Republicans can stay in office. Republicans aren't going to stay in office. The Republicans are done. They just don't know it yet. Come 2026, they're going to get blown... Well, it is 26. Come November, they're going to get blown out in the midterms. They're going to get blown out. They're probably going to lose the House by 30 or 40 seats. There's a good chance. It's not a guarantee, but a good chance they lose the Senate. Specifically, if they don't come to some sort of an agreement soon and pass the ACA subsidies. Island Man, who is now currently blocked, says we're not done. Well, nope, yeah. The Republicans are done, and so are you. Because I don't deal with MAGAs. Republicans are done, they just don't know it. They backed the winning horse to the point where they had a chance. They had an off-ramp. Their off-ramp was getting rid of Donald Trump in 21, after January 6th. But instead they went down, they bowed the knee because they were weak. Angel says, love you from Texas. Well, thank you. Lemon says they're so willfully ignorant. They are. They are. Love Big Dog says the pendulum is going to swing way left. Well, another creator that some of you may know, The Rational Boomer. I'm on his podcast a lot. I watch his videos a lot. And he makes this analogy. Lemon says, have to run. We'll check you out again. Well, thank you. Also, if you want to catch the rest of the live, this will be up over on my YouTube channel at Analytical Iowan. It'll go up sometime later. Well, I guess now today, Saturday. It's going to be the Analytical Iowan podcast for today. But anyway, going back to the Rational Boomer for a minute, talking about the pendulum. His comparison, this is his comparison, not mine, but it makes sense. And it's fitting with what we're talking about for weather in the country right now. I'm from Iowa. I'm used to driving on ice and snow and all of the crappy weather. And, you know, when you're in the middle of it, you crank the wheel one way, you start shifting, you're sliding, then you gotta swing back the other way, and you go hard. You're going to the right, you go to the left, you go to the right a little bit, the left a little bit, and eventually you get it straightened back out, and you catch back up, and you're down. It's going to take a big shift left to balance it out back in the middle. Vincent says, stay warm. Hope the power stays on your side. Yeah, I hope everybody does stay warm. All City says, 1 second here. Every 2 years this happened. They won't lose the Senate. Get over it. Maybe JD in 28 is more your speed. No, you're gone. I didn't say they would lose the Senate. I said they could. It's possible. Especially with the ACA subsidies not being renewed. That is going to affect a lot of people, specifically in red states. Gronky says, Chuck Grassley is your senator. Good luck. Yeah, we need it. Chuck fucking Grassley. Jesus Christ. Man's older than dirt. Literally. This is a true fact. I say this as often as I can because it's remarkable. He is 92 years old. He is older than the first printing for the chocolate chip cookie recipe. Okay? Chuck Grassley is older than the first printing for chocolate chip cookies. He was born in 1933. And yet, at 92 years old, his seat is up for re-election in 28. He wants to run again at the age of 94. He will be 100 after if he wins that. And Grassley is so popular in this state, he doesn't campaign. He holds one event every summer that he is up for election. And that's it. That is his campaign. They don't run ads. Now, some of the PACs may run ads for him, but his campaign does not run ads. Vincent says, was negative 40, negative 50 during Christmas week for me. I'm from Iowa. I can handle the cold. That's too damn cold. Love Big Dog says, definitely need age limits. We do. And Grassley's one of the reasons I champion him. That man has been in the U.S. Senate longer than I have been alive. And one of the reasons he keeps getting reelected is because people like me, people my age and younger, remember being in school. And I remember being in, it was like 5th or 6th grade when we were learning about how government worked. And we had a form letter we had to send to a senator in Congress. I remember having to write to Senator Grassley. We all did. Everybody in my class. I think it was, the other senator at the time was Tom Latham. But we both had to write letters to Grassley or Latham, one of the two. Everybody did. I remember doing it. And too many people get this idea that, well, he's been in there forever, he must know what he's doing, and it's good for Iowa. And that is one of the things that has happened, right? They have this idea that he's good for us because he's now the oldest member of the Republican Party. He's the Senate pro tem. He's third in line to the presidency at 92 years old. And sure, he does some good things for the state of Iowa, including the Farm Bill. But enough is enough, and the man should retire. Although I still think he's more cognitively aware than the man sitting in the White House right now. Vincent says, Betty White was older than sliced bread. Yeah. Pre-sliced bread uh, was actually an amazing invention, and it's new. It came about after Betty White was born. It puts it into perspective. Vincent says Canada got that professor who studies fascism from America. Really, that's interesting. I didn't know that. So if I still have that. Nope, I still got that current restriction. Oh well, I'm not going to be here much longer. Picked up 2 restrictions in the first 12 minutes I was live. All because I pissed off some maggots for blocking them. And I called them out. But we've had a good live. We've had a good run. A lot of good questions, a lot of good comments. Didn't know what to expect going live. This is a lot later than I normally attempt it. So I thought I'd give it a shot. Still got a decent crowd, so really pleased with that. When this is all said and done, we're going to have a lot to fix. But it's possible to still fix it. It is possible to vote our way out of it. Now, we can't be necessarily complicit. We got to be up in arms. We got to be talking. We got to be protesting, calling your representatives, calling your senators, and complaining, things like that. Between now and then, it's Drew Day. Says, "Wow, that's new. Santa Claus talking about politics on his day off." I mean, not the worst comparison I've gotten. I've been called a lot worse. But we're gonna get through this. We will get through it. We get to the midterms, and the Republicans aren't going to see it coming. And I really think what could happen is after the midterm election, in that sweet spot, it's Drew says, "Come on, that's not bad. I'm just joking, sir." I knew you were joking. I was waiting to see how you reacted, because it tells me I have been insulted on this live, and I blocked them because they were MAGA. Love Big Doug says, "How can they not?" Because they believe they're winning. They do. They genuinely believe that they are winning. That they somehow have the magic formula, because they fell ass backwards into winning in 2024, when all signs pointed to them losing. They think they've got the magic key, and they're going to somehow pull it out. But I think somewhere in that sweet spot, right after the midterms, from November 3rd this year, I think? November 2nd or 3rd? Till January 3rd, there's that period where you have a lot of people who are going to know whether or not they still have a job. And I think the ones that no longer have a job will have no reason to care if they're on the Republican side. And that may be where they make their move against Donald Trump, and they impeach him and they remove him. Why? So that they can set up J.D. Vance going into 28, trying to give themselves an in. And I said it earlier in this live, but I'm going to say it again. I think what they're going to do is try to set J.D. Vance up to have this compassionate narrative of, well, you got to vote for J.D. to give him 4 more years with a Republican Congress, because those evil Democrats wouldn't let him fix all the problems that the Democrats caused. When J.D. takes over, whenever that is, whether that is tomorrow, whether that is January of 2027 or 2028, their narrative is going to be all the problems in the world are still the Democrats' fault from Biden. They will not blame Donald Trump for anything. Love Big Doug says too little too late. It also says MAGA doesn't like GD. No, they don't. But when Donald is gone, they're hoping to find a way to get rid of Donnie and still keep that MAGA base voting Republican. Okay? That's why if something comes out that has Donnie in the files, like say one picture of Donnie with an underage girl on his lap, not wearing a top, something like that, that MAGA base will turn on Donnie in a heartbeat. And then the Republicans are hoping that they can keep most of them to keep voting for the Republican no matter who it is. Even if it's the guy they don't like, that's JD. Vincent says Republicans will use AI to spread misinformation. 110%. That's why people like myself are going to be out here spreading information and clarity and trying to bring the real story as best we can. Jen asks, I'm sorry, but wouldn't JD be as bad as the orange guy? Yes and no. Yes, he has just as evil of intentions. Would he be worse? No. Why? Because JD does not have the pull over MAGA. He does not have the same pull over Congress. Okay? If, hang on. Gloria said power just went out. Storm was getting bad here. Had to start the generator. Well, hope you stay safe. But anyway, if they pull the plug and they move on JD, or they move on Donnie, JD doesn't have the sway over the Republican Party. They just don't. Okay? JD's not going to be able to call up Congress and say, I want this to happen now. It's not going to happen. He doesn't have that pull. And if the Republicans decide to impeach and remove Donnie on their own, if it's their call, JD Vance is going to be given marching orders by the Republican establishment because their goal is going to be to right the ship and try to fix themselves, whether it's going into the midterms later this year or whether it's going into the general in 28. It's going to be to fix the image of the Republican Party, and it's going to be to end the craziness. John says, but all what you are saying is not going to happen. I don't know what am I saying isn't going to happen? I'm just giving you my predictions. Blair says J.D. Vance is owned by billionaires. Yeah, he is. And that's a problem. That's why I don't think he's going to win in 28. The Republicans aren't going to be able to win in 28 with J.D. Vance or anybody else. They don't have a good candidate. The White Rose says we need to use other means in the Constitution to get rid of them all. I think you're referring to Article 2, Section 4, talking about impeachment. And there's a lot of misinformation floating around about that article. And a lot of people are saying, well, if we impeach Donald Trump on high crimes or treason, it gets rid of everybody. No, it doesn't. You get rid of one person. It just gives examples of what is impeachable and who can be impeached. They would have to impeach everybody separately. And as I've talked about it, what I think would happen if they remove Donald Trump, the Republicans would give J.D. Vance marching orders, right? Very, very tight marching orders, trying to right the ship going into 28. And he would get rid of most of the problems. Hegseth would be gone. Bondi would be gone. Patel, gone. Kristi Noem, gone. Probably right off the bat. Whether he fired them or asked for their resignation or they just came out and resigned on their own, I think they'd all be gone. Okay? And then JD would be able to get other candidates in there to fill those roles, trying to bring it back to a more a more Bush era Republican ideology. John said President Trump is not going anywhere. Yes, he is, and so are you. That's why you're blocked. I just don't think he makes it to 2029. He's either going to get removed, they're going to use the 25th Amendment and say he's not fit, or he's going to end up croaking because he's not in good health. Blitz says, who's a good candidate for the Dems? Gavin Newsom or Kamala Harris? Gavin Newsom's too early. Because, well, he's peaking right now. There are plenty of other good candidates. Kamala Harris, I think she could be a good candidate. However, she did lose in 2024. And I don't know if she can bring her image back, and I don't know if she's going to run. But earlier in this live, I talked about a bunch of people who could be good candidates for the Democrats. And because it's so far out, there could be a rising star we haven't seen yet. Somebody could come out and, blow everything out of the water. I talked earlier about Rob Sand being the next governor of Iowa. Who knows? And I'm not saying Rob Sand could be president, but he may come out and just astound everybody with his campaign for governor of Iowa. And in the 2 years, he may make impressive gains for Iowa and draw a spotlight on himself to make it a national name. We don't know. It's 3 years, 2 years before we're going to be electing the next president. It's too early to be saying who the front runner is going to be. Angel says, I agree with you. White Rose says, but would JD be worse? I don't think he'd be worse because of the marching orders that he's going to get from the Republican Party. Now, he won't be on such a short leash if Donnie croaks. If the Big Mac gets him, well, then it might be a little bit of a free-for-all. But he still doesn't have the sway over the Republicans. He's not going to be able to get away with as much because the party isn't set up to just let him do whatever he wants. Love Big Dog says we need to clean house. You see the Dems approved more funding for ICE? I did. I did. And that's a problem. It's not even just that they gave him more funding. It's that they gave him more funding without putting in any more protections or guardrails to prevent it from being misused. And they're coming out with, they're going to get body cameras and they're going to do this. And it's very weak and limp-wristed. And we need to watch those Democrats. However, right now, the first priority is getting the Democrats back in charge. And then we go through, once they're in charge, then we clean house. We start righting the ship, and then we end up, then we clean house inside our own house, because they're the bigger problem right now. Gloria says, do you think the damage DT created can be smoothed over in the next few years if he's voted out? Few years? No. The damage is going to take a couple of presidential terms, long term, to pick out. It really is. We're going to have a lot of damage to pick, and it's not just, it's going to take time to get everything passed, extra funding, raise the minimum wage, all this stuff, right? White Rose says it would take 50 years to repair the damage. I don't think it'll take 50. But it's going to probably take more than one presidential term. And the problem the Democrats are going to have is that if they don't fix things fast enough, come the midterms for the next presidential election after this. So we're talking whoever wins in 28, there'd be midterms in 30. If the Democrats have a favorable House and Senate, if they haven't fixed it fast enough, they'd be at risk of losing the House and the Senate then. Because people are like, well, you didn't fix it fast enough. We'll give the other guys a chance again. That's what happened to Biden. They didn't get it fixed fast enough. The Republicans came in and said, well, we can fix everything. Just put us in charge. But they were the ones who fucked it all up to begin with. Mass Mike says ICE has been around since the 90s. I think it was early 2000s. Mass Mike says, "Oh, I can tell. I can tell what Mass Mike is. Born and raised in Minnesota, is wrecked because of Walz, and look at the way he leans. Walz doesn't lean. He doesn't have a lean. Donald Trump leans. He was gripping that podium for dear life. Mass Mike says, how can he even back the fraud? And wanting to destroy the state even more. The fraud they're talking about was years old. Most people had already been charged and convicted. And guess what? The woman who was convicted just recently for major fraud involving that whole case looks like me as far as skin complexion and was not from Somalia. But people like Mike will never hear it because they only listen to Fox News and the cream of bullshit soup they peddle. Love Big Dog says MAGA cult. Yeah, at Mike. Mike's already gone. I already blocked him. Angel says, I agree with you. Well, thank you. All right. Well, I've been going about a little over an hour and a half. I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. I'm going to get it processing and downloaded so I can get it posted over to YouTube. This will be Saturday's Analytical Iowan podcast. For those of you who didn't know, I do a podcast almost daily. And this will be today's podcast. Go ahead and check me out over on YouTube at Analytical Iowan. I'm going to do more lives, varying times, usually later at earlier in the evening than this, but not midday. I hope everybody who is out in the middle of this ice storm goes out and stays safe. And I hope you have a great day, and I will talk to you the next time I go live.
That was Eric. That does it for our analysis today. If you appreciated us cutting through the noise to get to the critical context, please make sure you're subscribed to the Analytical Iowan podcast on Spotify and YouTube. We'll be back tomorrow. Thanks for listening.